The judge mocked him. The courtroom laughed. But when the billionaire revealed his true legal genius, the entire room was left speechless. The grand courtroom buzzed with anticipation as Damian Steele, billionaire CEO of Steele Enterprises, took his seat at the defendant's table. Across from him, the opposing attorney smirked. They all thought this was going to be easy. After all, Damian wasn't a lawyer, he was just a businessman. And yet, he had refused to bring an attorney. The judge, an older man with a sharp tongue, peered over his glasses at Damian. "Mr. Steele, do you really intend to represent yourself today?" Damian adjusted his cufflinks, his expression unreadable. "Yes, Your Honor." A chuckle rippled through the courtroom. The idea of a billionaire thinking he could outsmart trained lawyers? Absurd. The judge smirked. "I'll allow it, though I strongly advise against it." The opposing attorney stood, his confidence overflowing. "Your Honor, this case is simple. My client was wrongfully terminated by Mr. Steele's company, and we are demanding compensation." Damian leaned back, completely unfazed. "Wrongfully terminated," he said, his voice calm. "Your client was fired for breaching their contract. Surely you've read the fine print." The attorney scoffed. "There was nothing in that contract preventing my client from discussing company matters publicly." Damian's lips curled into a knowing smile. "Actually, there was." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a copy of the contract, one that none of them had expected. As he slid it across the table, the attorney's smirk faltered. Damian leaned forward. "Page 17, Clause 4B. Any public disclosure of proprietary company information results in immediate termination without compensation." The courtroom fell silent. The attorney scrambled to flip through the pages, only to realize Damian was right. The judge's smirk disappeared, and just like that, the entire case began to crumble, because they had underestimated Damian Steele, and now they were about to pay for it. The opposing attorney's face turned pale as he flipped through the contract, scanning desperately for a loophole, but there was none. Damian sat back, completely composed. He had written that contract himself, every word, every clause, ironclad. The judge cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses as he skimmed the document. His smirk was gone. "Mr. Steele," he said, his voice noticeably more serious now, "are you telling me you drafted this contract personally?" Damian nodded. "That's correct, Your Honor." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The opposing attorney was sweating now. "Your Honor, this clause, surely it can't override labor laws." Damian cut in smoothly. "Actually, it doesn't override them. It aligns with them. Your client signed this contract voluntarily, with full acknowledgement of the confidentiality terms." He slid another document forward. "This is the signed acknowledgement form." The attorney snatched it up, his confidence crumbling. Damian tilted his head. "Tell me, counselor, did your client happen to mention this little detail to you before you took this case?" The attorney's jaw clenched. "Your Honor, we request a recess." The judge held up a hand. "No need. I've seen enough." He turned to the plaintiff, who sat frozen, realizing the mistake they had made. "You knowingly violated your employment contract, and Mr. Steele has provided clear evidence to support his case." He adjusted his glasses. "This case is dismissed." A collective gasp filled the courtroom. The opposing attorney slumped in his seat, humiliated. Damian. He simply stood, buttoned his suit jacket, and gave a small nod. Before leaving, he turned to the judge, his voice smooth. "I appreciate your time, Your Honor." The judge blinked, then chuckled softly. "Remind me never to underestimate a billionaire who drafts his own contracts." The courtroom erupted in whispers as Damian strolled out, victorious. Because today he hadn't just won a case. He had reminded the world why he was always 10 steps ahead. 1 week later, Damian sat in his corner office, overlooking the city skyline. Another day, another victory. His assistant, Mila, walked in with a smirk. "You're all over the news." She placed a tablet in front of him, showing headlines that had taken over the business world. Billionaire Damian Steele stuns courtroom, outmaneuvers lawyers without an attorney. Judge mocked him, then regretted it. The legal genius of Damian Steele. Damian chuckled, scrolling through the articles. Mila folded her arms. "I don't think anyone's going to question your legal skills after this," he smirked. "Good. Maybe next time they'll think twice before taking me to court." Mila tilted her head. "Speaking of which, that same law firm, they've quietly dropped 2 other cases against you." Damian raised an eyebrow. "Smart move." She placed another file on his desk. "But here's the fun part. A few major companies are now asking if you'd consider consulting on contract law." Damian let out a short laugh. "So they underestimated me. Now they want my help?" Mila smirked. "Pretty much." He glanced out the window, thinking for a moment. He didn't need the money. But the idea of turning the legal world on its head, that was tempting. He tapped his fingers on the desk. "Tell them I'll consider it, at triple my standard rate." Mila grinned. "You're ruthless." Damian leaned back, a knowing smile on his face. "No, Mila, I'm just always prepared." And as he looked at the headlines one last time, one thing was clear. No one would ever underestimate him again. 1 year later, the world had changed its tune about Damian Steele. What started as a viral courtroom moment had turned into something much bigger. Law schools were studying his contracts, corporate CEOs were seeking his expertise, and his name had become synonymous with legal strategy. And today, he was about to take things one step further. Inside a packed conference hall, hundreds of the country's top lawyers, executives, and business leaders sat in eager anticipation. A massive screen behind the stage displayed the words, "The Steele Method, Mastering Contract Law and Corporate Defense." The murmurs died down as Damian stepped onto the stage. He wasn't wearing a judge's robe or a lawyer's pin, just his signature-tailored suit and unwavering confidence. He adjusted the microphone, smirking slightly as he scanned the audience. "A year ago, a judge laughed at me for representing myself." Soft chuckles rippled through the crowd. "They assumed that because I wasn't a lawyer, I couldn't possibly understand the legal system well enough to win." His smirk grew. They were wrong. The room erupted into applause. Damian continued, pacing the stage. "In business, in law, in life, people will always underestimate you. And the greatest advantage you can have is letting them." He turned to the audience, his voice filled with conviction. "Because when they least expect it, that's when you strike." The crowd hung onto every word. "Today, I'm here to show you how to take control, how to protect what's yours, how to ensure that no one, judge, lawyer, or billionaire, can ever outmaneuver you again." Another thunderous applause. Damian glanced at Mila, standing at the side of the stage, grinning proudly. A year ago, they had laughed at him. Today, they were paying to learn from him. And as he launched into his first lesson, one thing was clear. Damian Steele wasn't just playing the game anymore. He was rewriting the rules. 5 years later, the world of corporate law had changed, and Damian Steele was the reason why. His Steele method had become the gold standard for business contracts and corporate defense. Universities taught his strategies. CEOs sought his advice. Even the law firms that once mocked him, now they begged to have him speak at their events. And today, he was about to make history. The packed auditorium at Harvard Law School buzzed with anticipation. Damian wasn't just a guest speaker. He was unveiling something revolutionary. A massive screen displayed the words, "The Steele Legal Institute, the future of business law." Damian stepped onto the stage, standing tall, dressed in his signature suit, exuding confidence. The room fell silent. He smirked, looking at the sea of eager faces, law students, attorneys, business leaders. A few years ago, a judge laughed at me in court. Soft chuckles spread through the room. They thought I was just another billionaire who thought he was smarter than the system. But here's the thing. He paused, his smirk growing. I wasn't trying to beat the system. I was building something better. The audience erupted into applause. Damian continued, his voice sharp and commanding. Today, I'm launching the Steele Legal Institute, a place where business leaders and legal minds will train together to create airtight contracts, indestructible corporate structures, and strategies that will protect companies from the very lawsuits that once tried to bring me down. He gestured to the screen behind him. This isn't just a school, it's a movement. More applause. Damian smirked, glancing at Myla, who stood at the side of the stage beaming with pride. A few years ago they had mocked him. Today, they were learning from him. And as he looked out at the crowd, one thing was crystal clear. Damian Steele hadn't just won the game. He had redefined it,